Welcome to my channel and welcome to Apple Month. For the next month, we are going to be making delicious small batch treats all made with apples. And so today we're kicking out Apple Month with a twist on a classic dessert, sour cream apple pie. And we're making it to feed two. So if you are looking for a sweet treat without a lot of leftovers, I've got you. All right, so our recipe today starts with a pastry crust. This pie uses a pastry crust. Now, you have two options. You can buy a pre-made pastry crust from the grocery store, and no judgment, I do it all the time. Or you can make one from scratch. I want to show you how really easy it is to make a pie crust from scratch. So that's what we're going to do today. All right, we're going to start with a 1.25 cups of all-purpose flour in my bowl here. And we're going to add in about 1/8 teaspoon of salt. And then 1/4 cup of butter, and I am using salted butter. So if you're using unsalted butter, add in a little bit more salt. And my butter is actually room temperature. I know a lot of people like to make their pie crust with chilled butter, but for this small batch, I find this works just fine. And what we're gonna do is you can use a pastry blender or a fork and just start by incorporating that butter into the flour. And then we're gonna we wanna have cold water. So I've just put some ice cubes in water here. And I don't have a precise amount for you of how much water you're gonna use because a lot of it's gonna depend on the type of flour you're using, the temperature, all that kind of stuff. So you're gonna have to do it by feel. And we're going to, once that butter is incorporated in there, we're gonna add some water. And we're only gonna do it a teaspoon at a time. And like I said, I like to use cold water. I'm actually gonna start probably with 3 teaspoons. This actually may be 1/2 teaspoon. So I think I just put in 1.5 teaspoons. And then you wanna stir it until it starts to come together. Now you don't want your dough really wet. So I'm gonna put in another 1.5. So we've got 3 teaspoons in there. You wanna get that flour so it doesn't look dry. You're gonna need a little bit more. Now, if you end up putting too much water in, you can always add a little bit more flour, but you don't want to overwork this because when you overwork it, you get a tough pie crust. You want a nice, light, flaky pie crust. So just do it a little at a time rather than pouring a whole bunch in. And sometimes what I would do is I use my hand to see if I can bring it together, but it's still a little dry. You want the dough to be just a little damp, not wet. But I think I'm gonna add in, and like I said, I just like to get my hands in there and use my hands. Just use your hand, bring it together. Like I said, try not to overwork it too much. Maybe one more. There's some dry flour there. Get that mixed up. All right, I think we got it. Because you want it all to come together into just one ball of dough. There we go. All right, we got it. Now I'm gonna take it and divide it into 2 because we're making 2 pies. There we go, and we're gonna set one aside. Now we are using these little pie tins. There's a link to them down below in my description, and I think they're 5 inches. Right, now we're gonna roll out our pie dough. You can see how quick and easy that is to mix up. I mean, you can't even get to the store and back, if you're gonna buy some. So if you don't have any store-bought pie crust on hand, it's super easy to make your own. Now I'm gonna take just a piece of parchment paper. I'm gonna grab a little bit of flour, hold on. I'm just gonna sprinkle a little flour here so it doesn't stick to my parchment paper. Put my ball of dough in the middle, and then I just like to push it down into like a disc. And then we're gonna roll it out. And I'm just gonna use my rolling pin. And now you wanna try to get it as close to a circular shape as you can. So the way I like to roll up my pie dough is I just roll it back and forth, and then I rotate my dough. Did you get that? You gotta do the part too. Just 45 degrees or a 1/4 turn. And then we're gonna turn it again. And there goes my flour on the floor. And then roll it again. And then just keep turning and repeating rolling it till you've got it rolled out big enough to fit in your pie tin. I think that's good. You can just take your pie tin, kind of measure, and you want at least 1 inch around the outside of the pie tin. And if it's a little short in some places, we can take from one place and patch it together. So no worries. All right, so once you've got it big enough, we're just gonna take our pie tin and flip our dough. It'll come right off the parchment paper and lay it into the pie tin. Now I like to lift up the edge and kind of push it down in because you want to make sure it's all the way in to your pie dish. So just lift it up and push it in. And then just kind of make sure it's all up against the pie tin. Then we're just going to take what's hanging over the edge, and if it's more than an inch, I would just tear it off. And we want to fold that edge under to create the edge of our pie crust. Just take it and tuck it under and then just kind of squeeze it together. And if you end up with some, like I said, hanging over, you can just kind of get rid of that. And I just like to take it, turn it, flatten it up against the side of my hand. All right, and then we're gonna flute to the edge. And so I'm just gonna take my finger, stick it into the dough, and use my 2 other fingers just to kind of pinch. Pinch it all the way around. This is totally just for aesthetics only. You can leave it just like it is if you prefer. All right, so we'll just set that one aside and we're gonna repeat with our second ball of dough. Get a little flour and then just go ahead and roll it out and line the pie tin just the same way. Right now we're ready to make that apple pie filling. And so today we're gonna use a Granny Smith. My favorite is to use a nice tart apple in my apple desserts because I find that that tartness with the sweetness is a nice balance. But you could use a Honeycrisp, a Gala, a Fuji, whatever apple you may have around, and you only need 1 apple. Now, if you love apple desserts, I want you to make sure you check out some of my other apple recipes here on YouTube. Now, I have another apple pie that is really a family favorite at our house, and it requires no pastry crust. So if you just aren't up to the pastry crust, you're gonna wanna try this one, and I will link to it up above. And also, you don't wanna miss my apple crisp, another Wilkes family favorite. And then I also have an apple cake for 2 and a apple brown Betty. So check out those other apple desserts. So we're gonna take our apple, and I did peel my apple and then I chopped it up into as evenly sized pieces as you can. They're not really small, but they're not big, probably a 1/2 inch. I like to use a little bit bigger rather than dicing it up super small because it still gives you a little bit of crunch in that apple. The smaller you chop them up, the softer it will be. So we've got that mixed up right here. I'll put that aside for just a minute. In our bowl, we are gonna add, this is a sour cream apple pie. So we have got full fat sour cream. Highly recommend you use full fat. 1/2 cup of full fat sour cream right there. We have 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. We're gonna use a tablespoon of all-purpose flour. That will kind of help as a bit of a thickener. Just a pinch of salt. And then 2 tablespoons of beaten egg. So take your egg, beat it up, and 2 tablespoons is about 1/2 of an egg. 1 full egg is too much, would make it too eggy. So we're just gonna add that in. I've already pre-measured that. Let me grab a spoon. Okay, we're just gonna mix that up. And then we will add our apples in. Oops. Get that all nice and combined. And I almost forgot, we're gonna add a little vanilla in, just a 1/4 teaspoon. And you know me, I just measure with my heart. And then mix that up. And we're gonna now take our pie crust and put 1/2 of the mixture into each pie crust. Try to get it as even as possible. Doesn't have to be exact. But then we're gonna pop it in the oven at 425 degrees for just 15 minutes, all right? And then we're gonna turn the oven down. We're gonna turn it down to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and then bake it for another 20, sometimes 25 minutes, just until you can see that the sour cream is kind of set and it's just getting a little tiny bit golden brown on top. Because then we're gonna pull it out and add the crumb topping and bake it some more. And here, just a little trick for you. I like to put my pies onto just a baking sheet because it makes it so much easier to get in and out of the oven like this versus dealing with 2 tiny little pans. All right, we are ready to, while it is baking, we're gonna mix up the crumble that's gonna go on top. I have got 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. We're gonna use a teaspoon of cinnamon And then I have 1/4 of a cup of diced up chilled butter. For the crumble, I like to use chilled butter because then that crumble holds its shape better as it's baking rather than just kind of melting and spreading all over the pie. So we'll just mix this together, and then you just need to, you can use a fork, you can use a pastry blender. I honestly just like to use my fingers, my hands are clean. Because we're working with such small amounts, I find it just easier to incorporate that butter in with the flour and the sugar until it kind of resembles damp sand. All right, I pulled it out of the oven. And you can see the crust is starting to get nice and golden brown. If for some reason your crust is getting too brown, you can put a little piece of foil around the edge to keep it from browning more. All right, then we're gonna take that streusel topping and put it all over the top. Now, I like a lot of streusel topping, so if you don't like a lot, don't put it all on because it makes quite a bit. But for me, that's one of my favorite parts of the apple pie, is that yummy streusel topping. All right, we're gonna put it back in the oven for another 10 to 12 minutes until that streusel topping is cooked through and just starting to get nice and light and golden brown. All right, our pie is out of the oven. Now, there's 2 ways you can enjoy this sour cream apple pie. You can, of course, eat it warm out of the oven, but I actually think a sour cream pie is best if it has chilled first, and that allows that, see if you can see it here, if I hold this plate the right way, that sour cream layer to set up and get nice and creamy, so good. Now, if you decide to eat it warm, I think it's really good with some ice cream and maybe even some of that small batch caramel sauce right there, so good. But chilled, it is delicious too, so that makes it a perfect pie, especially if you want to make it ahead. Keep it in the refrigerator for a day or 2 because it's so good chilled. That tartness and creaminess of the sour cream offsets that sweetness of the crumble topping so well. It's delish. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's apple recipe. Make sure that you subscribe down below, turn on notifications so you will know when my next apple recipe drops next week. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen, and we'll see you in the next video.